Returning to a safe workplace can be a daunting task for many employers. This short video should help provide you with some practical tips on what to think about in preparing for your return. Hi, I'm Tanya Neitzert, partner at Boreala Management. I'm going to walk you through the guidelines for a safe return. These 11 steps will guide you in thinking about how to plan and implement a safe return to work. We'll be walking you through each step in more detail. It's important to know your obligations. It is our duty as an employer to take every precaution reasonable to protect workers from hazards in their workplaces. Although worded differently, each province and jurisdiction in Canada has occupational health and safety legislation that requires employers to ensure that workplaces are safe. Given the current pandemic, these obligations require employers to take additional steps to ensure we are protecting our employees. In order to comply, employers will be required to develop or adapt their health and safety policy based on COVID-19. They'll need to ensure the employees are informed and trained, and that roles and responsibilities of both the employer and the employee are clear. There are fines for non-compliance, so ensure you understand your obligations. Consider also that, beyond occupational health and safety requirements, there are additional legal obligations to consider. These will govern decision-making and policies, and they include human rights legislation, such as the duty to accommodate, and employment standards. In this current context, it is essential that employers remain informed. It is critical to know the local public health guidelines, as each jurisdiction has different regulations. Know your industry's specific guidelines and rules, and consider best practices of organizations similar to your own. Keeping up with the news can also help you identify the best and most current policies. Finally, stay informed of your organization's emergency measures plans and requirements to conducting your workplace risk assessment before embarking on any plan. Developing a COVID-19 health and safety policy is essential. Here are some aspects to consider in the development of this policy. Collaborate with your health and safety committee and union if they exist. Under what circumstances will employees be excluded from work? If employees are experiencing any COVID symptoms, if they have been in contact with someone who has COVID-19, or if they have traveled recently, they must be excluded from the workplace for the protection of all. The policy should define those employees who are vulnerable, such as employees over a certain age or with certain health conditions, as well as the process you will take with those employees. Employers will need to identify a process for identifying the employee's health status on a daily basis, such as a daily health questionnaire, as well as a log. Employers must identify the process to handle workplace illness, including isolation and sanitation. Additional considerations include the use of personal protective equipment, hygiene practices, and visitors. Consider also other policies which may need to be adapted for the current context. For example, you may need to validate your emergency measures or business continuity plans. Leave policies and disciplinary policies may need to be adapted. Medical note requirements may have to be modified or waived. Consider as well your work from home and flex time policies. It's recommended that any policies you modify are done on a temporary basis so they don't become permanent policies. Planning your workforce should also be considered carefully. How many employees are allowed to work given your office size, industry, and guidelines? Once the number of employees permitted to work has been established, identify how many employees are needed to complete business operations. If this isn't the full workforce, the process to selecting employees must be done carefully and based on equitable practices. You may additionally wish to survey staff about circumstances to better understand their availability. Public health guidelines recommend that employees who work from home continue to do so. Consider also rotational hours and job sharing if these are appropriate. Organizing the workspace will require careful consideration and planning. Here are a few guidelines to think about. Is your office located inside a commercial building? If yes, communicate with the building manager regarding procedures. How will entries, elevators, and common restrooms be managed? Will you need to modify workspaces to ensure a 2-meter distance? Set procedures for common areas and meeting rooms to ensure physical distancing and restricting of group sizes. Consider adapting doors to minimize handle usage and procedures for hallway traffic flow. Cleaning and hygiene procedures must be reviewed in this new reality to ensure that your organization is meeting its obligations. Some cleaning aspects to take into consideration include reviewing cleaning standards. Consider increasing cleaning frequency and coverage. Provide supplies and require frequent disinfecting of desks and computers. Consider common areas and guidelines for high-touch areas and objects such as microwaves and coffee machines. Add procedures for frequent hand washing. Consider limitations on or procedures for equipment sharing, such as the photocopier. Above all, ensure that there are procedures and guidelines in place for your hygiene practices. Communications in the return to work is essential, and there is never too much communication. Consider surveying your employees before returning to work to get a sense of how they are doing. Ensure to communicate before, as well as during and after the return to work, allowing questions and feedback. Check in frequently, using both formal channels, such as email and memos, and informal channels, such as phone or video calls. Communicate new procedures, policies, and guidelines by posting new information around the office and ensure policies are easily accessible. It is your obligation to ensure that staff are trained, and this should be done prior to the return to work. One or multiple virtual training sessions is recommended. Ensure staff understand the new procedures as well as the employer and employee obligations with respect to physical distancing, new hygiene procedures, completing the health status questionnaire, accessing the building, equipment usage, and any other new policies and procedures that you've implemented. Take the time to train managers, ideally first, so that they in turn can train staff or be available to answer any questions. And take the time to remind employees about being respectful and compassionate with others. More than ever, it is important for organizations to adopt a positive and constructive attitude in the workplace in order to reassure employees who might be feeling insecure, have psychological stress, or facing financial challenges. Everyone's situation is different. We may all be in the same storm, but we're in different boats. It can be tough to balance work and responsibilities at home, as well as keeping on top of one's mental and physical health. So expect uncertainty and make space for it. Validate access to programs such as employee assistance, and remind employees of the importance of self-care. Keep in contact. Think of those at home and not at work. Conduct frequent pulse checks where you find out how employees are doing through surveys and other means to ensure that you have a sense of how your employees are doing. Flexible policies can ease the stress of juggling kids and other responsibilities. And don't forget your managers. They often carry a big burden and are overlooked in your mental health procedures. Monitoring your new policies and guidelines will be important to ensure they continue to make sense and are adapted. Meet with your committees frequently and stay informed as public health guidelines may change. Revise and update as needed. Monitor if protocols are being respected, how employees are doing, and the office activity, and adjust schedules as needed. Be receptive to employee feedback and be compassionate, agile, and flexible in a context where uncertainty is the only certainty. In conclusion, in order to have the best return to work, employers should ensure to have prepared well, to prioritize the safety of your staff, to communicate and communicate some more, and be flexible and compassionate during an uncertain time. We hope you've enjoyed this brief overview of a safe return to work. If you'd like any additional information, please don't hesitate to contact us. Have a safe return.